It is about 1:30 in the morning, wrapping up my trip here to Rome, where I came out here to participate in a dialogue with leaders from different countries about peace, security, and prosperity in the Western Hemisphere and Europe. Obviously, there's been a lot of breaking news given President Biden announced he's not running for re-election. Kamala Harris has now gathered the support not only of President Biden, but the Clintons and leaders in Congress and many others. I fully expect her to be the Democratic nominee. So it's worthy for us to have a discussion of what does a President Kamala Harris look like, a Commander-in-Chief Kamala Harris, and what are some of the things from her record that we as voters should be examining as we go through this next 3 months of this election. So I jotted down a few notes that I think are worthy of our examination and our discussion. First of all, let's be clear about why this decision was made by the Democrat elite. They don't care about Joe Biden. Frankly, they don't care about Kamala Harris. They don't care about any certain individual. All they care really is about power. How do they stay in power? So they've put Joe Biden and his horse out to pasture. They've brought in a semi-new horse in Kamala Harris. This is very predictable. But we should not be mistaken or distracted by this switcheroo that's just taken place because nothing's going to change. The policies are not going to change. The elitist cabal of warmongers that are in control of the Democratic Party, led by the queen of warmongers herself, Hillary Clinton, will remain in charge. This is one of the main reasons why I left the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris will now be the maidservant of this queen of warmongers, continuing to be that figurehead, that front man for those unelected people who are actually calling the shots and pulling the strings, making decisions about our foreign policy and our domestic policy. You have to look at, knowing that to be true, what are the consequences of those policies? Where have they gotten us? Well, we're on the brink of war with multiple countries, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, just to name a few, and closer to the brink of nuclear Armageddon than we ever have been before. Why are we here? Well, it's the military-industrial complex that's continuing to profit very, very well from us being in a constant state of war, and the national security state, who have more power and more authorities to try to undermine our fundamental freedoms and our liberty when we are in a state of war. How many times have you heard, the argument, well, we have to place these limitations on your rights and freedoms, your civil liberties, in order to keep our country safe. That's a false choice that we, the people, should not accept. We should demand more from our leaders to uphold our constitutional rights and freedoms enshrined in our founding documents, and also make decisions that ensure our safety, our security, and our freedom. You go back to the 2020 presidential primary. I challenged Kamala Harris on the debate stage about her record as she called herself the person would be the prosecuting president. She was the former attorney general for California. She was former district attorney for San Francisco, and she said she was proud of her record on criminal justice. And so I asked her some very simple and obvious questions, pointing out her abysmal record when she was in a position to actually bring about real reforms to the criminal justice system there in California. You might see this clip playing around. I seem to be seeing it more and more these days.
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
She had no answer for her record on how ultimately, when she was in a position to help people, she made decisions that hurt people. As vice president, the first task that she was given by President Biden was to be the border czar, to go and help resolve the illegal immigration crisis at the border. Did she do so? Not at all. As you may recall, it took her a very, very, very long time to even go and visit the border. Now, I don't know about you, but if it were me and I was tasked with securing the border, how long do you think it would take me to get to the border? I would be there the next day. Immediately, go and assess the situation and come up with an actionable, achievable plan to solve that problem. We got none of that from Vice President Kamala Harris. And 3.5 years later, their open border policies, while they stood there and looked at cameras and told all of the American people, the borders are secure.
The border is secure.
The border is secure.
We're working to make sure it's safe and orderly and humane.
The border is secure, and we are working every day to increase its security.
One of our highest priorities is to ensure that we have a secure border.
They have not been secure. So in an election year ploy, President Biden finally signed this executive order and started to crack down on the border and says, hey, look, there are fewer illegal immigrants crossing the border. Look at the great work. No, man. You missed your window, and where was Vice President Kamala Harris in all of this? So in the most important task that she was given, the first task that she was given in this role as Vice President, she has nothing to stand on for her record other than failure. You're going to be hearing a lot of revisionist history being written by the mainstream propaganda media, who are going to do all that they possibly can to prop her up, to make her appear to be this great candidate and someone who is qualified to serve as president and commander-in-chief. We can't allow ourselves to fall for it. We got to, again, look at the facts, look at her record, and understand that not only is she unfit and incapable of being our president and commander-in-chief, she would actually be quite dangerous in this position. I've talked a little bit about foreign policy, talked about border security. What about the insane, radical woke ideology that they are pushing on our kids? Vice President Kamala Harris has stood in lockstep with those who are supporting puberty blockers in our kids, child mutilation surgeries that are irreversible, taking away a parent's ability to stop doctors, so-called doctors, you can't even call them that, from pushing these things on the most vulnerable among us, on these kids. Kamala Harris supports allowing boys to play against girls in girls' sports. Kamala Harris supports allowing boys and men go into women's spaces like bathrooms and locker rooms. When you look at the basic fundamentals of how someone who denies the existence of objective truth, this biological truth that there are differences between men and women and boys and girls, how can a person like that be entrusted with the safety, security, freedom, and well-being of the American people and lead this country? The short answer is we cannot. We cannot trust someone who is so out of touch with reality and has reached a level of insanity to reject the existence of this objective truth. We cannot trust them with the reins of power in this country. And then fundamentally, of course, to wrap this up, I'm sure there will be many, many issues to speak on over these next 3 months as we head towards Election Day on November 5th. But to wrap things up, we have to focus on freedom. Kamala Harris, like the Democrat elite, have done all they can to divide us as people. She has done all she can to racialize everything, to tear us apart based on our skin color. She, as a senator on the Judiciary Committee, violated the Constitution by essentially implementing a religious test when considering which judicial nominees to confirm or to reject. I've spoken about this before. She has been very direct about calling into question a nominee's faith, their religion, their relationship with God, their spiritual practice in a way that indicts them and finding them disqualified to serve in that position specifically because of their religion. As you know, the Constitution says there shall be no religious test for those who are serving in public office, whether elected or otherwise. How can we trust someone to lead the United States of America who fundamentally rejects the Constitution of the United States of America and rejects our God-given rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution, who rejects our freedom of religion, to worship God as we choose or not at all, who rejects our right to free speech, our right to criticize our government, our right to say what we want, to get information as we choose from the sources that we choose. She, like the Democrat elite, believe in censorship, silencing their political opponents and using our government and their friends in big tech to do so. And in taking this power of deciding who has a voice and who doesn't and putting it in the hands of the government in the name of protecting we the people from things like misinformation or disinformation or hate speech or what they call violent speech or offensive speech. But of course, only they are the ones who get to determine the criteria for what speech is allowable and what is not. We are facing this 1984 Orwellian moment and a very, very clear choice in this election. A vote for what it looks to be a Kamala Harris at the top of the Democratic ticket will equate to more of what we've seen coming from this elitist cabal of woke warmongers, more unnecessary, costly wars, pushing us closer to the brink of nuclear war, more of these insane and radically woke, divisive policies that are undermining the fabric of the foundation of our country, which is freedom, and harming the most vulnerable among us, and an increasingly tyrannical government. Or a vote for Donald Trump, someone who has the strength to stand up to the military-industrial complex, the national security state, someone who will ensure we are not unnecessarily going to war, putting the lives of my brothers and sisters in uniform on the line, someone who values and appreciates the Constitution, our freedoms and civil liberties, and who will make decisions that serve the best interests of the American people, our safety, security, and freedom.